if you're already speaking that narrative that I don't want to lead and I don't want people and, people are going to be, too hard, I just think that's a massive roadblock to get started here. Work-life balance is just key to being refreshed and being ready to go and filling up your own cup, and making sure you're doing the things that you need to do to disconnect so that when you are in your business, you can go 110%. The main point of difference between what we do and what a lawyer does is a lawyer will give legal advice, so they'll interpret the law and they'll give them that advice, whereas we interpret legislation. So we guide our clients around the legislation.
What one key piece of advice would you like to give to everyone watching and listening today?
Getting things set up right the first time, that's key, because when you're going back over and doing things again and again because you didn't get it right the first time, well, to me, that's just annoying and a waste of time.
Hello and welcome to the Business Growth Show, where we talk about all components of business and how to utilize them for exponential growth. My name is Nathan Cassiotis. I'm a business growth expert who help business owners grow and scale to create wealth and freedom. Today, I have an awesome guest. Her name is Kelly Salmon, and she's the founder and director of Growth HR, a dynamic HR consulting firm specializing in helping small to medium-sized businesses navigate HR challenges and foster positive workplace cultures. And Kelly has over a decade of experience in human resources with a background that spans diverse industries from real estate to legal, giving her a unique perspective on the HR needs of different businesses and industries. And Kelly's mission with Growth HR is to provide personalised, agile, and solution-driven HR support to businesses that may not have in-house HR resources. And known for a down-to-earth and practical approach, Kelly focuses on reducing stress for business owners by simplifying HR processes, ensuring compliance, and nurturing strong, supportive work environments. And through Growth HR, Kelly partners with clients across Australia, offering services from recruitment to HR advice and cloud-based HR and payroll integration. And with a passion for helping others and a deep understanding of the HR landscape, Kelly is more than a consultant. She's a true partner in your business journey. Welcome, Kelly Salmon, and thank you for being on the Business Growth Show.
Thanks, Ethan. So happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome to have you here as well. I'm sure it's going to be a great show for everyone watching and listening today. And you are a successful entrepreneur. So for those people who don't know who you are, just introduce yourself by telling us a little bit more about you and your journey.
Sure. So I started my career in HR about 20 years ago, and initially that was in real estate. So in a real estate firm, there's a lot of things that go on with the people in those firms, and that was a really good basis for me to start my career in HR. So I absolutely loved that. I loved property. I loved the energy. I loved the people and the diversity that came with a real estate career. And after about 10 years in that career and working with some really reputable agencies across Sydney, I then delved into building and construction. And what I found is there were so many different crossovers between real estate and the building and construction industry. And so I spent a couple of years with another growing firm, just really helping them grow and establish their HR department. They were on a really rapid growth phase when it came to expanding with their people. So learned a lot, did a lot with them. And fast forward a few years, there was a couple of other roles in between in a couple of different industries. I then got a tap on the shoulder by someone that I used to work with who owned a legal practice. And he asked if I would come and work for him as an internal HR manager, but also do some HR consulting. So that's where I established myself as a consultant within the HR industry, and I absolutely loved it. I loved every minute, and I was able to start getting a really good understanding of how, I guess, similar every industry is when it comes to your HR framework and how you manage your people, right? It doesn't matter if it's a cafe down the road selling coffee or a big manufacturing company, the legislation and the framework is all the same. So I spent a couple of years being a consultant and really understanding the legal side of that as well with a couple of lawyers in that firm. And then, the famous 2020 COVID happened, and I had quite a big moment with my health that year. And that was really an opportunity for me to see and to get clear on what I really wanted for myself and my family, for my future. So as much as that was a really big thing that happened to me medically and mentally and physically, that was what I call my light bulb moment that helped me really understand that I wanted to do something for myself. So sure enough, this business was a COVID baby, and next week I resigned. My mum, who's an accountant, set me up with my company. I was meeting with website designers, graphic designers. We had the logo happening, and yeah, basically just hit the road running and started servicing people from day one. So here we are, 3.5 years later, and yeah, working with all sorts of people across the country and New Zealand, and absolutely loving every single moment of it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing the journey. And I love the light bulb moments. So those pivotal points in life where things change, and then yeah, you're able to create something of your own, and make that bigger difference across different businesses. So yeah, thanks for sharing that part with us there. So let's just start, because HR consulting is an interesting one, right?
Mm,
Especially as businesses get bigger, right?
mm,
HR starts to become more important as we get more people in the team. So can you explain a bit more about, I guess, the role of an external,
mm-hmm.
HR partner like you?
Yeah, sure. So I am like an advisor to my clients. So I work really closely with them. I speak to them a couple of times a week, and we work as an outside advisor to their business. So when we start working with people, we do a process. It's a deep dive, and we really jump in and really understand what's going on in their business. And that's not just from a people perspective. We try to understand what are their goals, what are their objectives, what's their service and products, and then we dive a little bit deeper, sorry, and we really understand, what are you trying to achieve here as a whole, and where can we help you with that. So that's the initial stage that we do with our clients, and then we take them through our proven process from there. So one of the first things we look at is their compliance, because we're going to be partnering with them as a HR advisor. It's really important for us to know, what does this look like when it comes to compliance? And when I say compliance, I mean things like, what's the award that these staff are governed by? What's the pay rates? Are these pay rates correct as per their award? What's their entitlements? What's their hours that they're working? What's their employment agreement? What's the company's policies and procedures that are in place? So we really take the time to go through that with a fine-tooth comb. And in order for us to advise and guide our clients later on down the track, as a HR business partner, you need to really understand that piece. So when I first start working with a client, that's the first thing I do. I take the time and I really understand, what does their framework look like. And then what we do is we set out a roadmap. So we really understand, what are they trying to achieve by bringing us on. Some businesses might have a focus in their culture. Some people might really want to understand that compliance piece, and that they might need to pivot a couple of things about, what award they're under, or their entitlements for their staff. So we really help our clients get clear on what these things look like, and we put those pillars in place. And then, yeah, we set out on our journey, and we talk to them constantly, and we guide them, and I suppose advise them through this process.
Yeah, definitely. It's awesome. And yeah, I think consultants, like my first business was a consulting, still doing it business. And I think it's so important, right, to get these, specialists, right, in business. And me, I think of myself as more of the generalist, the business coach, right? And then you get people like yourself, specialists. Hey, you need help in the HR area, get someone like Kelly in, right, where she's going to dive deep and really make sure that you're doing
Mm,
everything that's important there, especially, yeah, with legislations and things like that, which is important. Let's talk about some common challenges, right? So you're seeing a lot of
mm.
businesses that's happening out there. For SMEs, what are some of the common challenges, and maybe how can we, yeah, overcome them so that people can be aware of what is out there?
Yeah, so do you mean the challenges that those businesses are having?
Yeah, what are some common HR
Yeah,
challenges and things that, yeah, you
yeah.
find?
So I think first and foremost, one of the big things this year is understanding the changes that have happened to the workplace relations. The system has changed dramatically in many ways over the last 18 months. So that's key. Understand the market that we're in today, understand today's legislation. I think from my perspective, a big one is making sure business owners have employment agreements in place. It's super basic. Have it in writing, know exactly the terms and conditions in how you've engaged your staff. And that's not just for you as a business owner, but it's also for the staff because they can understand and be clear on what's expected. So that would be key. And then we go into policies and procedures. So again, really understanding what's the expectation. Do they need to travel in their role? Do they need to wear a uniform? How do they apply for annual leave? All of those things that are behaviors that come into the workplace. And then we really set out on those individual terms and conditions that affect each business. So, they're different for every single business and industry, but we try to dive deep on what do people need to know and what needs to be in writing so that we can be super clear. And then we also layer in a job description in there as well, because there's a lot of small businesses that I speak to and I say, well, let me have a look at your employment agreement and your policies. And then the next question might be, what's in the job description? What's this person here to do? And when those things are missing, that's when things get messy.
Yeah. No, I love that. Awesome. One thing you made me think.
And that's also where,
You're right.
conflict starts as well. So conflict will arise when those things aren't documented in writing.
Yeah, clear expectations, really important. One thing you got me thinking about, right? Because I see this in certain industries, and you probably understand this from a construction space as well, is that it's easy when it's an employee that's on a standard salary, but when you're starting to do hours outside of norms and things like that, then it's like pay and a half, double time, all these things. It starts to get more complex, right? On managing that. So, I guess what are your thoughts around this, right? Like, because you hear a lot of stuff in the media. It's like these people didn't pay the right amount and now I've got to back pay and things like that, right? So there's a lot of potential issues that could happen if you're not doing the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the changes to the legislation that's come into effect this year is actually wage theft. And for those that are listening and don't know what wage theft is, it's when an employer doesn't pay the right entitlements and overtime rates and whatever else might be, allowances, for example, that's associated with their award. And if they're cutting their employees short of those basic entitlements, that is when an employer will fall into wage theft. So it's very easily done, especially when people have taken an approach, a couple of years ago of giving a salary package. We've had increases to superannuation. We've had award wage increases. We've had changes to the awards. Like you said, you have overtime that comes into effect. So that's a classic example of where a wage theft claim can sneak up on people with a business owner being completely oblivious to that being, a thing. And, to express the importance of that is that wage theft is now actually a criminalised act under the Fair Work Act. So it's a pretty serious matter and it's something you really want to be across. It's not something that they're taking lightly now. So that's definitely key and something that I think can be really overwhelming for business owners. So that's something that we help a lot of people through. We try to take out the complexity of that. We try to help them understand, again, from the beginning, well, what do you want of your employees? What does their work day look like, their hours? Do they have to go away for work? Do they have to drive their car or drive someone else's car? And we really look at all those ins and outs so that we can get a good picture of how they should be remunerated.
Yeah, no, I love that. One thing I think you mentioned there a couple of times, I think is an important one is around awards, right? So, from my understanding, if there's obviously there can be a simple role, which is like an award role. Sometimes it's like a hybrid role or something, they're doing a few different things where an award doesn't really, cover it, I guess, in that way. So what are the standards there? If it's a simple role, for an industry under a particular role, do you have to do you have to put it under the award, or is it like, open to interpretation on whether you use the award or not? How does that work?
So a general rule of thumb is that the award is the absolute minimum you can pay your staff. Okay. So if we have a really unconventional position in your business, for example, and they don't fall under a traditional award, then we would help you identify what we think is either the closest award or potentially even what's called the miscellaneous award, which accounts for a lot of roles that don't sit under their own award. And then we would look at what are those minimum entitlements that come under that award. And we look at things like overtime, working hours, lunch breaks, all the things. And then we'd work backwards from there. So hopefully that answers your question there.
Yeah, cool. No, I'm always interested, right? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that have been hired without awards before, but as long as I guess you're
Yeah.
hitting the minimums, of what's
Yeah.
required, then that's the main thing, there. So, yeah, cool, awesome. Thank you for sharing. I always like, where my brain goes on these things. I'm sure if I'm thinking about it, someone else is as well.
Yeah.
Employee engagement, right? And workplace culture. You've touched on these.
Yeah.
They're big, right? Big topics. We want to make sure we've got, a team that's doing what we want, it's working well, it's a great culture, things like that. What are some
Mm.
ways that you can share to build this positive, engaged team?
Yeah, sure. So at Growth HR, I'm a certified DISC practitioner, and I think you are as well, Ethan. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the DISC program. So that's a fabulous tool that we work with our clients just to really help them understand, what are their employees' strengths and what's their natural strengths and where they sit within that DISC framework, but also where they think they sit and, where they might overextend in some areas. So that's one of the things that we do. We go in and we help our clients understand themselves and obviously the team around them. And as you know, that's a super powerful tool. A lot of people love it. Business owners love it because it really helps you understand not only yourself but the way other people work. In terms of culture in general, I mean, it's such a broad term, and it's spoken about very differently from workplace to workplace. And when I say to you, oh, we've got a great culture, that can be, what is great and how do I define what great means? Because what's great to me is probably different to you. So this is a real common issue we're seeing across business to business and the people within those businesses, because we don't normally define culture specifically, with the words and the things that are involved with that culture. We just describe it as good or bad or toxic or fun. So we dive a bit deeper again with our clients, and we really help to uncover, what they want to be treated like and how they want to feel when they come to work and where they are right now and how we can help them bridge that gap.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, disc is so powerful. The four main personality types, definitely highly recommended from me as well. To get an understanding. It's great that you help people through that as well, because it's, yeah, from the whole recruitment to just management of people and potentially changing people's roles, or how you communicate them, because
Mm,
you don't communicate to everybody the same, right? Because it's
mm.
very different on how they get information. So yeah, really, really powerful. Love that. So let's talk about being a leader now. And, as a business owner, we have to be a leader, as much as possible, right? To lead the vision and everyone coming onto it. Well, some of the people I speak to, they don't want to manage people, right? And
Yeah.
really, it's you need to have people in a business to grow it, right? Over time. And I'm sure you're probably
Yeah.
seeing this as well. So what do you do if you've got these business owners that are like, oh, I want to grow, but I don't necessarily want to manage people? Like, what options are there, I guess, to help them to still be able to grow the people in their organization?
Well, I'm sure you'll agree with me on this one, but I think if a business owner is saying something like that, then we've got a mindset issue. And, they're going to block themselves from being able to be a good people leader and be able to then manage and lead their team. Because if you're already speaking that narrative that I don't want to lead and I don't want people and, people are going to be, too hard, I just think that's a massive roadblock to get started here. So I think if someone says that to me, the first place I'm going to steer them to is a business coach, someone like yourself who can help with, mindset and really uncovering what those blocks are to help them, move forward in this area. As you said, if that's something they need to do in order to grow their business. But what I do find is the people that step into the leadership space without the fear, without the judgment on themselves, and just lead from the front, lead naturally, and accept the fact that they make mistakes and and get on with those mistakes. And that's what leadership is really. There's no real textbook. I mean, there's plenty of courses and what have you, but you're learning on the go, and you've just got to constantly have that self-reflection piece and reevaluate. And that's to me what it really comes down to. So
Yeah, no,
yeah.
great points. Completely agree. And yeah, one thing I tell my clients is that if you can hire someone that's 80% as good as you, that's good, because don't expect them to be 100% as good as you, because we're all unique, right? So expect them not to be as,
Yeah.
or make a few mistakes here and there, but you can build something that allows you to grow as well.
And it's a puzzle, so understanding your leadership style and how you're going to lead your team, but also making sure the other pieces in that puzzle are there. And that's where I'll circle back to, what I mentioned earlier, like having that really good understanding of what you're expecting of your staff, making sure they have a good understanding of what they need to deliver when they're at work. Because, yeah, I mean, ultimately, employees, the reason we have employees is to be productive, and as you said, to help grow the business and deliver either a product or a service. So I think the leadership is a piece of this puzzle that we're talking about, and there's lots of other pieces in there as well.
Yeah, definitely awesome stuff. I know you've shared a bit of this already, but I know you do a lot with compliance, which is important
Mm,
in the HR
yeah,
space, and you've got like the national employee standards and other
yeah.
things like that. Apart from, I guess, what we've talked about, is there anything else that I guess we should be aware of that, might, hurt us, or that we need, make sure that we're implementing, in the business as well?
Oh, look, how long's a piece of string, right? But
We'll do a
it can
3 hour
be
Joe
very
Rogan
long. So
podcast and be
yeah.
here for a while. No, we'll leave that for another time.
Okay. Look, yeah, I think I've touched on it. Like, be really clear on what your award is that governs you. Obviously, you mentioned national employment standards. That applies to everyone within Australia. So understand and be clear on what that looks like. Awards, policy and procedure is key for your business. I often say to business owners when I'm talking to them, we can't sack someone for taking a sick leave day, right? Everyone's entitled to that. But you might be able to sack them for not following the process to take that sick leave day. So just thinking about that little analogy and understanding how that applies to the Fair Work system and the national employment standards. But yeah, look, compliance can go on and on and on. There's different industries that have very complex awards and pay rates and levels and classifications and overtime rates and allowances and what have you. So there's all sorts of things that come out of that we help our clients with as well, and different ways that you can implement things to make sure you're compliant. You could have things like individual flexibility agreements, and then there's the ways in which you manage your staff who might work remotely and what that looks like for the business. Again, you want to reduce your risk and make sure you're compliant. There's obviously workplace health and safety that goes in there as well. So as I said, it's a big topic, that one, and it's so um, unique depending on the industry and the role. But I think absolutely, like you said, awards, national employment standards, fair work legislation, that's your key things to be aware of. And then engage an expert, really, if you're not sure where to go from there.
Yeah, no, great points. And I remember when I was doing my MBA and doing this subject, the one key thing I remembered was that, like, if you're trying to sack someone, like you were talking about, or like performance manage, let's call it, right?
Mm,
there's a lot of steps that need to happen, and you need to make
mm-hmm,
sure you follow these steps. Otherwise, you could be liable with Fair Work and stuff like that, right? And this is where someone like yourself, the guide through that process, is really important.
mm.
So you're not liable for something right down the track.
Yeah. And that's why, too, I keep harping on about policies, but your policies will actually guide the way for you about how you will go through that process. So that's why I really believe that's a baseline on making sure you get your HR department set up.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome stuff. Now let's just say we're, going more down a legal route here, right? Where you're talking
Mm,
about things. And I guess what's the difference between like someone like yourself, right? Like a HR
mm,
consultant going down that route compared to like maybe a commercial lawyer, that's involved with people
yeah.
issues and how that works. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of business owners, I think, will pick up the phone and speak to their lawyer when they do have a HR issue, which, is fine. And I think in most cases, those lawyers can certainly support and guide their clients in doing so. But I think the main point of difference between what we do and what a lawyer does is a lawyer will give legal advice, so they'll interpret the law and they'll give them that advice, whereas we interpret legislation. So we guide our clients around the legislation. We help them when people get a little bit complex, and we basically help them stay out of the Fair Work Ombudsman system. So if someone does get a claim, and when I talk about claims, I'm talking about either a general protections claim or an unfair dismissal claim, then they go through a Fair Work Commission process. Generally speaking, when you go through that process, the Fair Work doesn't like to see a lawyer in that process, because you've got an employer versus an employee. And when you have lawyers involved, you've got a power imbalance. And that's not something that looks very favourable when you come into conciliation and mediation processes. So clients engage our services to help them through this process. That's where we have a deep understanding of the legislation. It's not legal advice. And, if we can't get that resolution, or the client doesn't get that resolution at that mediation phase, which is the Fair Work Commission phase, then unfortunately for most cases that will go legal. So that's the next stage when a lawyer will get involved. But yeah, that's really where we sit, in supporting them through the legislation. But I think, put legislation aside as well, it's about holding their hand and just being there for them to support and guide and even coach in many ways. Because when you're dealing with people and situations get prickly and stressful, it's your emotions are heightened, and sometimes people just need that clear, level-headed person to help guide them on what's possibly going to happen as the outcome. So that's where we play a big role, just helping our clients, one step after another, and just really taking them through the situation and guiding them along the way. And as I said, it's not legal advice, but in many cases when you're dealing with people, it's things that we've seen before, and it's all the things that we've learnt along the way with dealing with complex workplace situations.
Yeah, awesome stuff. And yeah, helping them to stay neutral with that emotional intelligence, right? When there can be a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
emotions that can come up. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So,
and keep it around business, not personal.
yeah. No, exactly. Really important. Now, I know that you help with like a cloud-based HR and payroll, like integrations and things
Yeah,
like that. So, like, tell me the differences here, right? Because I know that, for example, some business owners might be like, oh, but in my Xero or accounting software, right, I have a payroll
mm,
element here,
mm,
pay people, but maybe it's more simple compared to maybe other areas of doing more complex, sort of payroll and things like
yeah,
that. So what are some differences there, and why should we be looking at other areas, with that sort of integrations and
sure.
payroll functions? Yeah.
Yeah, so I love Xero. I use Xero in my business, and it does do a good job when it comes to payroll. And I think that started to touch on what that looks like. It's a great system for small businesses, and I think the reason people would go away from Xero and into a more complex payroll system is, they're getting bigger and they've got more complexities when it comes to running their payroll. So what we do is, depending on how our clients are operating and depending on how big and complex their awards and their overtime and their payroll is in general, is sometimes we do suggest a couple of cloud-based programs which will look at their HR and their payroll all in one. So the main difference between something like that and Xero is the complexities and the sophistication that comes with these payroll products. So, for example, a lot of these big players on the market now have award interpretation. So that takes that pressure out of paying people correctly, and it's basically the computer and the AI interpreting those awards and the rates and the overtimes and the rest breaks and all of those things. So it's taking the heat off HR, but also the payroll administrator. So that's an example of where you would look at doing a more sophisticated pay software. It's certainly something that we see with businesses that are starting to get over, say, 50 staff either, And even if they've just got quite a complex awards and payroll system, and we're talking rostering as well, and managing those staff, rostering themselves on and off. Yeah, that's where we kind of start to go into that space of saying to our clients, have you considered using something with, a couple more features than what something like Xero or Mild has?
Yeah, cool. Love that. One thing that I'm aware of, right? I'd like to know your perspective on this is like when you've got a standard employee and you've just got them on a standard salary, right? Like an office-based person or working from home. There's normally a
Mm.
clause that I remember saying that you will work the hours necessary for your role, right? So that there's a little bit of
Yep.
flexibility that they take a little bit of time off to go to an appointment or they work a little bit late one day. It doesn't necessarily adjust the salary, right? In there. So
Okay. Yep.
I'd love to know your perspective.
I
That's all
love it.
good. What is there a gray area here?
Okay, so I think you're referring to a clause that's called reasonable additional overtime clause. And usually the wording is basically something along those lines. Like you said, from time to time, your role may require you to do reasonable additional overtime. And that is factored into your salary, like you said. So, that's definitely something that we see regularly. And we, depending, it's an open-ended question, right? And there's too many variables for me to say, is that a compliant clause? Because without knowing what someone gets paid and what award they're on and what they're asked to do, then, I can't tell you right now if that's, black and white, a compliant clause or not. But to answer your question, it's absolutely something we see. It's definitely something that's out there. And, in most cases, it's probably okay. But it's definitely, if you're going to use that, you still need to look at what we call the better off overall test, which we also call it the boot test. And that's a test that is usually ran to make sure that the employee is still better off overall, even if they do that reasonable additional overtime, and better off against the award wages is what I mean.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, interesting to
So
know
it's
that.
not just as straightforward as, yeah, we'll chuck that in and she'll be right. Is basically the crux of that answer.
And I think it's changed post COVID, especially with the younger people of today, right? Because I remember when I first started and I moved to Sydney from Adelaide, where it's a lot more faster pace. I was working some crazy hours. I had that clause in my contract, right? And I think it happens a
Yeah.
lot in the law industry or other industries where people are trying to get ahead, right? Where I think the onus is a little bit more on flexibility and working less now, where people don't necessarily do it as much to sort of be noticed. So I think it's maybe less important of are you extorting people or whatever with how much you're getting them to do above the what's
Yeah. It's funny, because, we touched on industries and that I'm across all different industries. And that's something I find is very different from industry to industry. What's acceptable as additional reasonable overtime, what's not, there's certain industries that wouldn't have that clause in and she'll be right. So there's definitely, lots of different quirks and things around different industries. And that would be a good example of that clause would differ greatly depending on your specific industry.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting one there. So, let's look a bit about work-life balance now, right? I think this is becoming really important. People wanting flexibility and just generally, I guess, of how you see of it right here with the workplace, dynamic there. So, yeah, what are your thoughts around this on how we can, I guess, get this?
For employees or for business owners or
However way you want to answer
yeah.
it. If you want to answer
Okay.
both, feel
So
free.
there was a new legislation that's come into effect this year, and I think most people have probably heard of it who are listening to this because it was all over the media, right? And it's called the right to disconnect. So that came into effect on the 26th of August this year. And as I said, the media just blasted it everywhere, and they're talking about, these big changes to workplace relations. So that legislation is now in effect for any business that has 16 or more staff, right? So it's going to come into effect next year, August 2025, for small businesses as well. So I've been having these conversations quite a bit this year about what this looks like, because I think if you put the hat on of a business owner and that legislation, the people I was speaking to, it felt like more red tape, and it felt like for them, this is another thing where I can't contact my employees out of hours, and it's another one of their rights, so to speak. And that's the way I suppose some people were interpreting it from the business owner perspective. Whereas if I put on my HR hat and I answer this question around this legislation, well, it's actually a really good opportunity to look at, well, how are we treating our employees, and do they have the opportunity to actually disconnect from work? And like you just said, one of your first jobs was working crazy hours, and what's that doing for your mental and physical health? And that result of your mental and physical health will ultimately change the results of your work, right? So there's a couple of different ways we can talk about this, but I think that legislation is essentially, it's going to help people in the long run. The reason they introduced the legislation was to reduce the mental health strain that's happening in our country. So, is that legislation going to directly impact that? Well, I don't know, and I think it's too early to tell, but I think that's one way to move towards being more aware of that, and giving staff the opportunity to disconnect. And that's, I'm going to circle back to your question, which is work-life balance. Well, I think it is important. We can't just work 24/7, right? That's not going to be good for anyone. There's rest is important, and so is other ways of connecting with things in life. And your purpose can be outside of what you do, and your drive. So yeah, I think it's important. And I think even as business owners, like, work-life balance is just key to being refreshed, and being ready to go, and filling up your own cup, and making sure you're doing the things that you need to do to disconnect, so that when you are in your business, you can go 110%. So yeah, it's important.
Yeah, definitely. Love those points there. And just my 2 cents as well is that it's probably more important now, especially with the working from home, right? And that flexibility element, because it's
Mm-hmm.
not like you're going to the office, you finish at 5, 6 o'clock, and then you drive home and you're disconnecting, or you train at home, whatever. It's now like, oh, I could just sit at my desk for another hour because I'm home. And then that's
Absolutely.
the gray area, right? Where how that happens from there.
Yeah. And technology, right? We're all always on. We don't stop. And we can all be guilty of that. And as you say, we might not have that commute home, but we've got access to our emails, which has everything we're working on that day, and all those platforms that we're working on as well on our phone. So yeah, just being really aware that we should disconnect from that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome stuff. Love it. And yeah, you shared so much gold with us here today. And I guess as we're starting to wrap up, what one key piece of advice would you like to give to everyone watching and listening today?
Oh, that's a big question. Look, I think, if in terms of HR and staff, it is a complex area of employment relations. So if people are unsure, like, get some advice. Like, we do half an hour discovery calls, which is, free for any people that we're not working with currently. So it's just about getting the right advice from the beginning, and that goes for, I think, anything you do, not just HR advice, but anything you do. Getting things set up right the first time, that's key, because when you're going back over and doing things again and again because you didn't get it right the first time, well, to me, that's just annoying and a waste of time. So that's probably my advice.
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree, right? This is why we've got, advisors, partners, coaches, mentors, whatever element, right? So we can get it right the first time without, taking a lot longer, a lot more stress, or just,
Yeah,
being in the wrong side of the law potentially.
yeah,
HR perspective.
yeah,
And you're like, oh, Kelly,
yeah.
can you
Take
get
the
me out of
guesswork.
this issue here now? You're like, we've gone a bit too far. It's going to be a tough one. So
That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. Let's get onto that early, and get you going in the right direction before we end up in that Kelly situation.
yeah, definitely love it. Awesome
And that
stuff.
goes for anything, I think, like, anything you do in life and business, not just HR. You
Yeah.
want to get things right the first time. So, yeah, that's definitely something I try to achieve. It doesn't always work out that well, but yeah, certainly aim for that.
And for that, yeah, awesome stuff. Well, yeah, we connected through our networks. We learned about your awesome journey from various business HR roles to now being the founder and director of Growth HR. Amazing woman, so knowledgeable. You shared a lot of gold with us here today, and I'm sure you continue to provide personalized, agile, and solutions-driven HR support to businesses. Very grateful that we connected, and look forward to connecting further. So, Kelly, how can people find you, get in contact with you?
Yeah, so as I said, our website, www.growthhr.com.au, we have you can book a discovery call there. We do that for all of our new clients. That's where we have a half an hour conversation and we get to understand those clients and they get to understand exactly how we work. And then, if they want to proceed with our services, that's where they've got all the information in that call to move forward. So that's probably the best way to get in touch with us.
Yeah, awesome. We'll definitely check out Growth HR there on the website. And yeah, if you got any questions, just book the call, right? Like anything, and have the
Yeah, that's
chat.
it.
And
Yeah. Happy to help if it's a quick call, happy to help. So, yeah.
yeah, definitely awesome stuff there. We'll definitely check out Kelly there, Growth HR. Awesome stuff for all of your HR needs. It's been a pleasure interviewing you, Kelly, and thanks for being on the Business Growth Show.
Thank you so much for having me, Ethan.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Business Growth Show, where we talk about everything on business growth. And please like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as Ethan Cassiotis, or visit my website, ethancassiotis.com. And if you want to grow and scale your business, you'd reach out to me on any platform to see if we're a good fit. So until next time, remember that our business grows where we learn skills and take action using them in spite of fear. So let's create wealth and freedom together.